Welcome everyone to our Community Connections conversations today. And this session is co-hosted by MTM-CNM Family Connection. And today from the Family Connection is myself, Erin Ward, along with Mark Ward and Marie Wood. And we're co-hosting today with Will Cure. And we have both Melanie and Dan Whiston with us as well. And we'll all be sharing a presentation to start off. We're so excited that you could take time out of your very busy lives to join us, and we're thrilled to have some exciting news to share with you, some things that our teams together have collaborated on that we want to share with you and have you participate in as well moving forward. Today, the topic is patient engagement and advocacy in drug and therapy development. And we all know that this is incredibly important because having the patient and family voice front and center in all things that we do as a community, but in particularly, it's very important for drug and therapy development. It's so important to collaborate with our researchers like we have in the past and moving forward with pharma industry and the development of hopeful therapies for our community. So today we're going to be sharing some opportunities and can't wait to get started. So I'm going to pass it over to Marie, who's going to share a little bit more about the structure for our day.
Hi. So as Erin said, I'm Marie Wood. And so for the agenda today, we're going to talk about our organizations and update you on what we've been doing and planning. We're going to talk a little bit about the drug development process, of course, and how you can be involved. And then after the presentation, we'll have a Q&A. But we do want to keep things conversational and interactive. So if you want to put a question in the chat, we'll try to address it as we're able. And then, as Erin mentioned earlier, this is recording, but it will be turned off at the end. So if anyone else wants to share and would rather not be recorded, you can do that at the end. So some ground rules. Let's be considerate and respectful. We do expect that everyone who's tuning in right now has registered and that you're representing yourselves as who you really are. No stealth mode. We're all parents and individuals who have bravely faced and continue to face incredible odds. So we should all have the confidence to stand in the light and be who we are. And that's really a passion of ours, to communicate courageously with openness, trust, and mutual respect. So we cherish and appreciate everyone here who truly represents our community by your own brave honesty and integrity. You guys are really the best. However, if you are in a clinical trial, we ask that you don't disclose that specific information in this forum, but we do still want to hear your input, and you're very welcome to participate in the discussion. Also, just as a medical advice disclaimer, we're not medical professionals, and this forum is not intended to provide medical advice. As always, we encourage you to seek medical advice from a qualified licensed physician. So next, we would just like to take a moment of silence to honor those who are no longer with us, but whose memory still lights the way for the future, because we keep them in our hearts with gratitude, and we believe that they're a part of everything that we do.
Thank you so much, Marie. I also wanted to take a moment just to share that we have a lot of families from the US, but we also have families from other countries joining us. And that's really important to us. I also want to acknowledge Ann Lennox, who is the founder of Myotubular Trust, one of the leaders in the global community that we've been partnering with, along with many others. And it's really important for us to acknowledge that whatever we do here in the US has a broad effect on the whole community, and likewise in other countries. So we're all really working hard to learn from one another. So although some of the activities are going to be focus more on the US, we welcome everyone to participate as they'd like. On that note as well, I just wanted to mention we also have industry partners here that express an interest in hearing about what we're doing, because they also are focused on patient engagement. And Lori Gowski from Dynacure has joined us today to mostly be in a listen mode, but she's welcome to participate as well. And so with that, we're going to turn it over to Dan and Melanie from WellCure.
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us and taking time out of your weekend. For those that don't know us, I'm Melanie Wisson. This is Dan Wisson. We're founders of WellCure. WellCure was founded after our son was born. William's going to be 10 this summer. Initially, when we founded WellCure, our mission was to fund scientific research solely. We funded some preclinical studies for gene therapy, some drug repurposing clinical trial, tissue repository, and various other projects. Over the last several years, we've added to our mission is advocacy, especially for the older MTM children, to ensure that they are not left behind. Next slide. These are just some pictures from some of our various fundraisers. In the beginning, our friends and family asked how they could help us, and we answered is to help us fund medical research. Now we're also asking to help advocate for MTM children. We're extremely honored and proud to be partnered with the MTM Family Connection today.
We both look forward to discussing what the future holds for the entire MTM community. Thanks.
And again, we're partnering with WellCure today, and we are the MTM-CNM Family Connection. And many of you are familiar with our biannual conferences. And again, they started in 2009 when actually a grassroots group of patients and families decided that it was important to get together in person and meet one another and connect, but also to meet directly with researchers in the community. And it provided an opportunity for many researchers at the time to meet each other in person for the very first time. And as you can see, it's grown over the years significantly. We keep needing wider lenses for the group photos. And in addition to hosting the conference, we do many other things. And in 2014, we decided it was important to form a nonprofit specifically around the conference activities and as a community organization for everyone to be involved with. And our mission is really to connect families with research, resources, and relationships. And along with that, it has come advocacy throughout the years. And it's been a pleasure to partner with WellCure in the more recent years on some of these efforts. Many of you have been wondering about what's next. As you can see, we went from 2019 and we would have been due this summer to have a conference. And unfortunately with COVID, we realized we were unable to do that in person, but we are planning a virtual series of different workshops. We're going to spread it throughout the summer. We know a lot of people are zoomed out and it's difficult to commit a whole weekend to an event. So we have some series being planned for that. And as well as we're very committed and passionate about the conferences and working hard to think about when it would be feasible to be able to do an in-person conference. And we're following very closely with others that are in similar situations around the rare disease community and having conversations about how things are going with planning and so forth. So there'll be more to still be determined and announcements to come in regards to that. But we have some really exciting things that will be happening this summer. Marie's going to share a little bit more about some of our activities.
Right. So our conferences are about bringing everybody together. Our underlying philosophy is all about empathy and empowerment. So we want to connect to others and promote connections that equip our families to face these incredible challenges. And it's not just about us or our team. It's about providing a base to strengthen our community in their individual daily lives and as a unified voice as we push forward. So we're about connecting all the stakeholders. Really, it's been kind of a unique and influential model that we've established with not just having patients and families meeting socially, and it isn't a purely medical conference attended just by doctors and researchers with journal papers, but rather it's combining elements of a community gathering along with those medical conference style presentations. And We have patient-parent panels, open forums where we're discussing meaningful topics and goals, endpoints for possible treatments. We've always encouraged this bi-directional communication between the patients and their families and the stakeholders from the professional community and pharma. So if you're working on MTM-CNM, we want to know you and hear from you, and we want you to know us and hear from us. So we've also additionally had these educational webinars and virtual connections that Aaron mentioned we did last summer. We have social media discussion groups, specifically about conference and family issues, and then another discussion group that focuses on carriers who are affected by MTM. And we have our newsletter and blog that can be found on our website, mtm-cnm.org, and we also have a YouTube channel.
All right, well, hello everybody, this is Mark Ward, part of MTM-CNM Family Connection. And as you know, today's topic is about drug and therapeutic development and patient engagement. So we're gonna talk about a little bit of background and context of the landscape for myotubular and centronuclear myopathy and how drug development is evolving. So first, just for those of you who aren't familiar, we'll talk about centronuclear myopathy or myopathies as a group of related disorders. X-linked MTM is one that you might be familiar with as kind of the largest component of that group, but there are certainly others as well. I like to think of it as sort of analogous to a car with a flat tire, right? So centronuclear myopathy refers to a characteristic of the cells that you can observe, just like you could observe you have a flat tire on your car. But how did that tire get flat? Might be a number of different ways, just like there's a number of different genes that can be involved in creating the disease in an individual. So the genes are primarily, again, myotubularin or X-linked MTM. There's also Dynamin-2, RYR1, BIN1, and SPEG that are known, as well as some others that are known in more recent years, and some still unknown to be discovered. Basically, genes are part of the instructions in your cells that provide the blueprint for producing proteins. And proteins are those things that are in your cells that do all the functions of living. So wherever you have a gene that's defective or missing, that means the protein that's produced is defective or missing, which then means there's some function that's missing. Just like if you have a flat tire in your car, it's going to affect how you drive. There's also various degrees of flat tire, so to speak. It could be a little low, or it could be a complete blowout. You could have 1, 2, 3, or 4 tires flat. So there's different degrees of severity, but they all have a similar type of characteristic. So again, we just want to make sure everybody has a real base understanding of there are different genes. And as we're going to try and treat or provide drugs or therapies to treat the different disorders, just like you need to know what's wrong with your flat tire. Does it have a nail in it? Is the valve stem loose? Whatever it might be, we need to understand the underlying cause, which usually goes back to the gene or the protein that the gene is producing. I'm going to try not to get too technical here, but there are a number of therapeutic approaches in development. I remember back when my son Will was born over 20 years ago, there weren't any. There was some of these that were maybe conceptual, but it's amazing to see how things have progressed. We actually do have approaches in development. So the first general approach is if that protein, which provides the function in the body, is missing, well, can you just replace it? Can we synthesize it and replace it in the body? In theory, yes. There's been some initial attempts at that have been demonstrated in like mouse models, but it's proven really difficult to manufacture for human trials, so that's not really active at the moment. If you can't replace a protein, can you replace the gene itself that produces the protein? Again, in theory, yes, and many of you are probably familiar with the ongoing clinical trial for gene therapy called Aspiro. That's so far proving to be you know, we'll say mixed results, right? Very promising in terms of the efficacy and many of the trial participants that the company has shared so far, but also some significant safety concerns with some tragic deaths in the trial. So this is not simple. Genetics and the biology of this is very complicated. So we still hold out great hope. We also need to understand there is no answer quite yet in terms of a therapy. Some of the others on the list involve rebalancing some of those other components. So you can think if you have one flat tire, maybe your car's off balance, but if you can lower the air in all the other tires, maybe it'll drive a little more balanced. And maybe that's what you want. So that's sort of the concept behind some of these other rebalancing of various biochemical signals in the body. So there's a human clinical trial in progress from Dynacure on antisense oligonucleotide therapy. That's underway in Europe. They haven't published any results yet, and it's not quite yet in the United States, but there are plans for that. Similarly, tamoxifen, which you might know is a chemotherapy drug that's already been on the market for many years for another condition. Some preclinical results show that maybe this can actually help for patients with centronuclear myopathy as well. They have just recently started enrolling in Canada, hopefully coming soon to the US as well. There are a couple other concepts in the works as well, but at various stages of preclinical work. So a fairly complicated landscape, but the main takeaway is whatever it is that is in development, all these development pathways are made better by your participation, right? By the patients and the families being directly involved in this. When we look at the overview of how a drug gets approved, it's a really complicated, long process with many steps. I'm not going to go through each of these in detail, but it starts all the way back at just the natural history studies, understanding the basis of what life is like, in our case with centronuclear myotubular myopathy. Some of the basic research in the laboratory before they can ever dream of assessing a clinical trial in a human being. Even the pre-phase 1 clinical assessment. So for example, if you're going to study a drug that's going to hopefully benefit patients with myotubular myopathy, well, we know that most, if not all of them, have some sort of ventilator dependence. But how do you measure the breathing on a patient who's very weak and relies on a mechanical ventilator? You need to have those measurements really well understood and characterized so that when you do try a drug, you have a way to measure the benefit. So there's a lot of work, and many of you may have participated in some of that preclinical investigations as well. The main phases of the clinical trials are seeking what we call a new drug application, an NDA, or in the case if it's a biologics, like a gene therapy, it would be a BLA, a biologics license application. So all the clinical trial data, all the background, all the natural history has to be all put together so that the FDA can then look at this complete package and say, is this, two main questions, is this safe and is it effective? And those are simple questions to ask, but as you can imagine, they're very complicated to answer because safety is a relative term and effectiveness is also a relative term. So what does safety and what does effectiveness mean to you, to the patients, to those who are most directly impacted? It's the FDA that has to make these decisions, or other regulatory agencies in other countries and other parts of the world. But it's us, the community, the patients that are going to live with those decisions. So we need to really make sure that the FDA and other regulators really understand where we're coming from as they're making these decisions and looking at this whole years-long process and all this data and understanding, making the right decisions for us on our behalf. And so that leads us to some of the activities of patient engagement and advocacy and how we as a community can and have
Thank you, Mark, for that helpful explanation. Next slide. Before we start talking about patient engagement and advocacy in drug and therapy development, we really wanted to share with you some thoughts that we've had on the continuum of patient and family engagement and advocacy. And it's really important for all of us to acknowledge that we are all advocates already. Advocacy really starts as an individual activity with when your child is born, when you yourself are diagnosed with a rare disease, and you learn to advocate for yourself and your loved ones. And I think most of the families and pretty much all the families that I've met in this community, when you go through something and you experience something, you're constantly trying to improve the process for the next family that comes behind you in your own communities and our larger community, the global community. So we all want to really acknowledge that you're already patient advocates. In the scope of the continuum, next, we really look at preclinical trial patient engagement. And that's really what the historical nature of our conference has been about, and many activities within the community of bringing patients and families together, along with academic researchers, medical professionals, and looking at what are the needs in the community. How can we all move this forward together? And then in more recent years, since around 2013, the introduction to pharma to our community, where there was interest in a pharmaceutical company, and more in the more recent years that has grown. And what we really want to impress upon you is that, you know, every single blood draw that people have donated to studies, every survey that you have completed, every observational study you've participated has been advocacy in action. And those are not unseen. Those are appreciated and important. And it's only through all of those selfless time and effort that you've given and your child has participated in, or you yourself or a young adult, where we are today as a community. So it's not one organization, it's not one person, it's all of this together. And especially in the more recent years with the trial participants in our first ever clinical trial being brave and volunteering for that. And we will be forever indebted to all of you, and especially to those whose children have passed in that process. So that's made us more passionate and more committed than ever to just continuing to push forward, making sure our patient and family voice is front and center, and holding there a space for that to be a part of every part of the process through pushing for transparency and accountability and all that good stuff. So that's where we are now. We are in this very active stage of moving things forward, drawing all of the stakeholders together. And before we move forward with speaking specifically about that, Marie's going to share a little bit about some of the specific activities that we've done as a community to keep this momentum going and building.
Thanks, Erin. So this is a little bit of what we talked about earlier with the conferences, just creating that community infrastructure, a collaborative platform with all the stakeholders, and including our ties with our international counterparts. We've partnered in developing, recruiting and reviewing for the natural history studies. We have been consulted as these things have been developed. We've accelerated the research through on-site data collection at our conferences. I remember one researcher was saying that what she gathered in that weekend would have normally taken her months to gather. And so we've created those types of opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, we have these forums where we listen to what matters to families, what really is a meaningful outcome, and engaging with pharma companies as they're being created and developed. We've collaborated with other organizations such as the American Society of Gene and Cell Therapy. They consulted us when they were developing some educational materials, not just us, but other leaders in the community, when they were developing educational materials about gene therapy and myotubular myopathy. Erin and I actually participated in a webinar with ASGCT and ABC, the American Brain Coalition, where we were talking about patient advocacy. And we've co-hosted these educational community conversations with WillCure. Some of you probably attended those virtual connections last summer, and just collaborating again with our friends across the pond, Ann Lennox over at the Myotubular Trust, and our friends in Germany, Spain, Italy, even South America. We're doing our best to stay connected to everybody. And Erin and I and Mark, we attend many conferences that are about educating ourselves on drug and therapeutic processes, and learning from other rare disease communities. Erin and I regularly attend the Global Genes Conference that takes place in California every fall. We also participate in legislative advocacy and Rare Across America, and heading down to Capitol Hill on during International Rare Disease Day and Week. So we're really committed towards what we see as patient-driven outcomes rather than simply patient-reported outcomes. So with drug development, if it's based on patient-reported outcomes, you're really just looking at how a drug or a treatment affects the patient. And the patient is kind of like in this passive role. And so to really get meaningful care, you see this movement towards patient-centered outcomes where you take into account the real lives of these patients and their stories. And ideally, from our perspective, and our goal is to move to the point where patients are really guiding the whole process. So we're involved in every step of the way, and that's what we see as a patient-driven outcome. And so that's why we keep on advocating for this greater patient engagement and mutual communication and transparency through the whole development process of drugs and therapies for MTM and CNM.
Yeah, so with all this patient advocacy and engagement throughout scientific research, throughout the pharma companies, and one of the areas that we haven't talked too much about so far has been on engagement with the regulatory agencies. So we're going to have Dan and Melanie share a little bit about what we've done so far, and then we'll talk about what's coming up as well. Just suffice it to say, the FDA in the United States is part of the federal government. And as such, it is, kind of a big bureaucratic organization. But to their credit, the FDA is, in recent years especially, really reaching out to help us and is genuinely interested in those patient-driven outcomes. So they've got a bit of an open ear, and we're looking to take advantage of that. So I'll hand it over to Dan and Melanie to talk about what we've done so far.
So this is really going to be an update of what we've been doing since the last conference in 2019, because it was right after that Melanie and I started pursuing how we could get in front of the FDA to ensure that the community and the patient perspective was given to them from our voice, from all of our voice. And we wanted to make sure that happened. If you can remember back then in 2019, we were looking at a little different landscape. COVID wasn't around, and the gene therapy trials were going, by all accounts, were going great. So a lot changed from the time I first reached out to the FDA to try and make a connection with them to see if we could present our voice. We did that by applying for and to hold a patient listening session. What is a patient listening session? Essentially, it's a 90-minute or 2-hour meeting at FDA in front of anybody from the FDA who wants to attend to discuss your disease. And I went through all the process, and Melanie went through all the process of trying to set this up, and started going through and submitted a 7-page agenda, had it all put together, started contacting with them, and lo and behold, I get a phone call and say, we have another application too. The MTM-CNM Family Connection has also put in an application. And my response was great. And she goes, well, that's good. Not all organizations work well together. I go, I think we can get this done, and we're going to have a fantastic presentation. So we combined our forces to put this on. And we originally had it scheduled for early 2020. And that kind of coincided with when we had been told that the gene therapy might be submitting an application for a potential drug approval. This would have allowed us as a community to present to them who we are, what this disease is. And that was really the agenda that we had first lined out. Let's talk about the disease, what a day in the life of the disease is, and how we can all really show them what it looks like from on the ground level. Well, unfortunately, with COVID, we couldn't do an in-person meeting. They were taking no in-person meetings after March. We rescheduled and eventually had to settle for August 3rd, 2020. So on August 3rd, 2020, a group of families, 4 of us, presented. It was a little bit smaller than I had originally planned, and I wish we could have had more families there, and I wish there would have been more time to collaborate. But if you remember, the world was a little topsy-turvy going into this. So it was primarily the families that are on this call. I think all the families are actually on this call. But the goal of it was to present a presentation that showed the spectrum of MTM from younger to older, and to try and give a broad base. And I think we did that very well. And in fact, I know we did that very well. The comments afterwards from the FDA were glowing. They said it was one of the best presentations they've ever seen. They were excited, top to bottom. Just couldn't have enjoyed the presentation more. And I will say it was very well attended. We had the heads of most of the major departments there, their second in command, people who were interested. Unfortunately, and I'm going to say this frankly, I think some of the interest came because that was not long after the tragic events had been reported. So I think that it timed well with that in a way so we could show them who we are in a community, that we still support treatment options, but at the same time recognize that we need safe treatment options. So I think your questions would probably be asking is, why did we go? What did we accomplish? And what did we discuss with the FDA? You know, you're not supposed to have an agenda, but I think if I were to try and give you one, I think it was that small changes for an MTM patient are big impact. We wanted to talk about if you're able to get off a ventilator for an extra hour a day, how that is an amazing result for your child. If you're able to have better secretion management, that's an amazing result. A little bit of energy throughout the day goes a long way. If your child is able to sit for an extra hour, that means an extra hour of school potentially. If your child's able to get a little benefit from any therapy, where you can go from not raising your hand to raising your hand, while that might not be walking or running or being ventilator independent, that would change that child's life. So we spent some time on that, and the list on the screen kind of shows some of the things we focused on, but we were very, very focused on showing how a little bit can go a long way. And we did that by showing how when our children have been sick or have suffered some regression, how that has impacted our lives. So it was a really good tie-in, and I think overall, and I'll defer to Mark, Aaron, and Marie and Melanie on their opinions, but I think it was well received, and I think it was a really first opened the door to the FDA to say, here's who we are as a community, here are our challenges, and here's what we're looking for in therapies, and let's not set the bar so high on any of our therapies that we could be hindering the community. And as an aside, we also made sure to say that we were looking for therapies for all young kids, toddlers, teenagers, adults, male, female. We wanted to make sure that the entire MTM population was on their radar. Some of the takeaways. I'll stay with this slide for a second. I think this was a great time for us to get our foot in the door, but we also wanted to make sure we'd be there as things move forward. We know that gene therapy at that time, we understood that gene therapy might come back online. And so at the same time, we wanted to make sure that as things progressed, our voice was heard. One of the few things that FDA didn't have and doesn't really have a great program for is accessing our voice. So that's what we're here today to really talk about, is what we've already done and how we can continue to talk to them so our voice isn't lost. We did that by building the relationship, starting the conversation, and really setting up what we're going to talk about next, which is going to be the next program in front of the FDA.
Dan, that was awesome description of the incredible experience. And had it been a different time, we had hoped it would have been bigger, even just with the listening session. But it was very powerful, and the reception was so positive that they had an opportunity to hear the full range of experiences, again, from a broad range of age ranges. And you could tell that, I guess, the number of people that attended, and also some of the comments at the end, it's important to know that the meetings held by the FDA regarding patient engagement are not allowed to be in specific conversations about a specific product. So even though, you know, we're able to talk about experiences and hopes, it's really not to talk about a specific product. But we are really a community that they want to hear from. And so with that, we thought, okay, we had this wonderful experience. What do we do next? How do we ensure that the momentum keeps going? How do we allow them to hear from multiple voices, as many voices and stories and experiences from this community as possible? Before I move forward, Marie and Dan, or Marie, Mark, and Melanie, did you want to share anything else on the listening session?
I think it was 47 people or something like that attended. I don't have the number in front of me from the FDA. So it was, I didn't expect such an overwhelming response from them. And I think the takeaway for everybody on this call was that the focus was on every therapy that might be out there and how a little goes a long way. And I really think they heard the message that we have no therapies for our community at this time that are approved. And we want to make sure that you understand our disease before you make any decisions. We don't want that decision making to happen in a vacuum. The therapeutic companies have the option of allowing us access at certain times, and we wanted to make sure that we did everything we could as a community to put our foot forward and to say, here's our perspective. And I'm encouraged for the next part of this presentation where we're going to get to have more voices. I know that the persons on this call that have spoken already, our voices are somewhat louder because we are the facilitators for some of this. But I don't want my voice or my opinions to be the only one. So this next step is, to me, is really exciting and really bringing the entire community into the involvement process. So
with that, we thought about what we should do next, and there are other opportunities that the FDA provides. So we collaboratively decided, you know, in the scope of what was going to come in the next year. Again, we had hoped that we'd be having an in-person meeting this summer, and within that context, we decided to go ahead and apply for what's called a Pfdd, and these are very hard to secure with the FDA. They lead internal ones that are directed by an FDA, and typically they've done about 30 of those. And I believe the number that are led externally is around 60. So in the scope of rare disease community, that's, you know, there's like over 7,000 rare diseases. We are very lucky that in the same scope of a year and a half, we were able to get approved for both the listening session, and we will be hosting an MTM-CNM community externally led patient-focused drug development meeting with the FDA. Ironically, the story is pretty funny, but ironically, the same exact day a year later, with all of the back and forth around when we could make this happen, it actually somehow stars align that it is a year later to the date. So we will be hosting this together, MTM-CNM Family Connection and WellCure. And most importantly, we will be hopefully engaging as many families, patients that want to be involved in this process. And there'll be multiple ways to be involved. We want to keep the momentum going. The fact that this has been approved says to us and says to our community that it is a priority to hear from us. The FDA wants to hear from us. A little bit about those words, acronyms Mark had on one of the slides around CDER and CBER. I just want to clarify that some of the products that we're looking at are under CDER as a drug, and then gene therapy is under biologics, which is CBER. And traditionally, PFDDs are typically facilitated by CDER. But in communities like ours that thankfully have multiple strategies being worked on, this is very new for the FDA as well, where they are beginning to internally collaborate. And it's very exciting that we actually have joint meetings with patient engagement participants from both CBER and CDER, helping us to develop this meeting and like Dan said, facilitate this meeting for the community. So what is a PFDD? That will be a word that we will be using frequently moving forward. So it's really an opportunity to hear directly from patients, family caregivers, patient advocates, really about what matters most to us and what is the impact of the disease. So we are going to be trying to find many examples and showing them with words, with videos, with pictures, what is the impact of this disease? What is the patient experience? Especially if there were currently available treatments, but in our case, the fact that there aren't available treatments other than medical therapeutic interventions, but there's not any drugs, there's no products being delivered. So what does that mean to us? And how they use this information is that they use it in terms of review. A lot of the reviewers that actually review the INDs and the BLAs attend these meetings so that when they're reviewing these applications, they can hear our voices in their heads. They can picture our children and adults that are affected by these diseases, and they can be thinking, hopefully they'll be thinking, what is the benefit? What is the risk? Of course, always prioritizing safety, but what is most important to this community? And most importantly, today, this is why we brought you here today to share this great, incredible news, to invite you into the process. We want to open it up now for a conversation and hear from you. What is it that you would want to say to the FDA? And we're not using this as a way just to collect data to use. We're just having this as a conversation, and we'd love to hear feedback. And this is just the start of a conversation and a relationship that will continue to move forward. So if, Mark, are you able to unmute or they can unmute themselves? Is that?
Yeah, people can unmute if they want to chime in with some thoughts on what would they want to share with the FDA while you're thinking about that, or finding your mute button. These are just some ideas that we're going to be looking to encourage people to certainly attend virtually this PFDD coming up in August, as well as to provide some of the content for it, whether that's a written story or a video clip, something that describes in your own words, your own experiences, how you're affected, what's your life like, as well as, what would be the meaningful impact, or how do you perceive the various risks and benefits of a potential therapy drug. And also we want you to help spread the word. So if anybody else has something they would like to share, let's see.
Can someone describe for me who attends a PFDD in terms of the community and kind of what the format is?
Yeah.
So maybe the people in the
Yeah.
MTM community can understand.
So for our session, typically it is usually the externally led ones are typically done in conjunction with large community conferences. So that was a vision for ours, but where it's going to be virtual, they've held many this year that are virtual. And it's usually a 5-hour event where people will be calling in, and they really prioritize wanting the entire presentation to be facilitated, to be directed by the patient and family community. So it will be many of us, but helping to facilitate, as well as many voices incorporated into patient panels, as well as presentations, pre-recorded, some live. We will have a presenter from the FDA as a part of it, but they heavily stress that they want it to be primarily driven patient and family voices. However, to that point, we will be incorporating all stakeholders into this. So medical researchers, pharma industry, everyone is invited to attend and to be engaged in things like polling sessions. We'll have maybe some polling questions where all participants will attend. Other ones will be primarily just for the patients and families to answer. So
So I see Lorena. Lorena has your hand raised. If you
great.
want to just unmute and share your thoughts.
Yes. So, sorry, Lorena Grease. We have our son here who just recently turned 1 year old, and he is diagnosed with X-linked. I'm just wanting to ensure, with what I'm understanding for what you guys are looking for the FDA, is the goal to try to humanize what we're doing so they have a better understanding of how it's affecting us as a patient and as a family? Or are you all looking for us to have something where we're saying, we want this because of X, Y, and Z? I just want to make sure that if we do submit something to you via writing or via any kind of media, that we're actually providing the right information, as opposed to giving you something that is not necessarily up the alley you guys are looking for.
Excellent. I love it. I love that you're already like, yes. So today, what we're going to be doing is after this event, and actually I can post it in just a moment, we're going to be having a way for you to just even tell us if this is something you would be interested in. And then as you choose the different things you might be interested in, you can select all of them. What we will do then is we will start communicating with, for example, if you say you're interested in doing a video, we will be collecting all of those emails and be communicating directly with you about next steps, about what are the kind of, what are we looking for, and what are the requests. So you can be kind of thinking about what your video you might like to be like. And actually, we're, to your question, we are looking for both. We're looking for an opportunity to talk about a patient experience and how it impacts. And then also our second big section will be on, if we had a therapy or a treatment, what would be most meaningful for you? So what the two examples you gave are actually both categories that we're going to be working with. But we also want to make sure we're not excluding or not, we may not, this is not just about us. We want to hear from you if there's things that are priority and that you think are more important for them to be hearing. So it kind of goes back to that question of, is there anything we haven't mentioned that you think that would be important to prioritize? So that we do have time. So we have about a little bit over 2 months. So we will definitely set up a process to give you more information along the way.
What I'm really excited about is that your answer with a 1-year-old might be far different than my answer is at having a 10-year-old. And that's the power of having all of us working on it, I think, is and working together and having our different voices, because I think there is a wide range here. And so to kind of answer your question directly, there's probably not a right or wrong answer, but the multiple voices, the more voices we can include, I think the stronger the presentation is, the stronger it's going to be to show the FDA what a day in the life of MTM is, or from this slide, what are the biggest daily challenges? How has it changed your life? The changes that we have now are probably different than what we had 3 years ago and 3 years ago before that. So I think this is really powerful for all of us. And I couldn't be more excited to get as many voices and include them in this presentation as we can.
And I also just want to also kind of going back to one of Mark's earlier slides on the umbrella of centronuclear myopathies. We did apply for this to be MTM-CNM all-inclusive. Because of the limited time with a 5-hour time frame, we have had conversations with the FDA that it might, with what's in the pipeline, it might be helpful to prioritize focusing on X-linked myotubular myopathy as a more severe condition, as well as, not to say that the others are not essential, as well as potentially incorporating some voices of Dynacure. But this is not, we don't want to exclude anybody from this process, because we can include everybody in portions of this. But just so that you are aware that because of where things are in the pipeline, those are the two kind of that have surfaced as, and primarily X-linked myopathy, but we want to be honoring some of the things coming along as well that will impact Dynacure right off. But it's been a tricky thing because we don't want to exclude any of the variants, but we also have a focused amount of time, and also in the context of what the FDA will be potentially reviewing in the coming year or so. So this is meant to be inclusive, and we want all people to be involved. So we will, if you see something that's interesting to you and you're one of the other variants, like, engage us, and we can figure out how to keep the momentum going for all of it. Does that, anyone want to speak to that? Did I do okay with that?
Yeah, thank you. I think Lorena has her hand up again, just for follow-up.
Just as a follow-up from what was just said, I wanted to check, as far as you were speaking towards the kind of experience you want for these, basically what I'm understanding is a testimonial for how this affects us and what we're hoping to gain from the FDA as part of a push. As far as I apologize if I'm somebody who's just jumps in. I'm one of those people that I like to just go. And if I think it's going to be helpful for my family or I can use it for my son, I'll take the reins and do whatever I need to do. So feel free to let me know if I need to take a second. But one thing that I want to ask is, as far as these testimonials and what we're doing, is like, my parents are highly involved in what he does. We're very much, my husband goes through and he does his own research. Before we found you all, it was because of what he did he found you guys on Instagram, and we went through and said, okay, we need to look at these different things. So as far as that, do you want like additional family members that are involved? We're lucky enough that we have the most random medical backgrounds that have been able to help us, as far as like PT, OT, speech, in various forms of our own family members who can advise us. So would you want those personal experience? Are you looking for like parent-child? Like, I just want to have a good understanding so that if I say, yes, I want to step in and do these things, be it, again, letter or video, I want to make sure that I'm going the right route. And like, I realize you said you would give more information as we get through this and that there's about a 2-month window, but I do want to make sure that I'm having a good understanding so that I'm not jumping in the wrong direction first.
Yeah, again, I think we really appreciate your enthusiasm and passion. There isn't a right or wrong answer here. We're not looking, the FDA is not looking to get a certain set of information that they're already expecting. They just want to know authentically, who are we and who are you and who is your family? And if your family has, this extended family involvement and a certain background, that's who you are. So by definition, whatever it is you feel that is important to share, that's going to be right. So don't worry about necessarily checking a certain box that the FDA or others are looking for, because what they want to know is who we are as people.
And all encompassing, right? The way that this disease impacts siblings, the way it impacts extended family, the impact on the family, and things like, the impact financially on careers, all of that plays into the picture of the impact of this disease. So yes to all of those.
And Aaron, if you can put that link in the
Hi
chat. So we
guys,
do
this
have a
is
very,
Patty. Oh,
Oh, great.
sorry,
Patty,
Mark. I hope I didn't
Patty, go ahead.
keep you
Yes.
guys up. Hi everyone. Patty and Sergio are online. Just wanted to thank you guys first and foremost for taking the reins on this huge achievement. Meeting in front of the panel FDA, that's massive. Thank you guys for always paving the way. Both groups, obviously, Melanie and Dan as well. Just wanted to say that we are willing to participate, whatever it takes. We've been ready for, I don't know how long, 9 years and counting. So definitely count us in.
Awesome.
that's
Excellent.
wonderful. Great to hear from you guys. You're doing well. Aaron, I think hopefully you can get Pat a link to this very simple Google form All it is just a place for you to record or give us your name and email address and just check off any of those types of things that you might be interested in. It's not a hard commitment. If you check off you want to make a video and later you decide, you know what, I don't really want to make a video, that's fine. It's just to kind of get the ball rolling on who might be interested and who we can help follow up with and provide more information to. So that link, I believe, is in the chat now. Go ahead and it'll take you 2 seconds to fill it out, as well as share it. We'll be sharing this, that link, on our various social media outlets, etc., as we go forward.
And I think that hopefully that is working. If anyone wants to check in.
And I just want to add on with the patient experience stories. I mean, you can feel confident to tell your story because you are the expert of your own life. Nobody knows your story like you do. And this is your chance to tell it as only you can. And as Mark said, it's just about being authentic and genuine and real. And, my biggest daily challenge may not be your biggest daily challenge, or the impact on my family may not be the impact on your family. So, and when we talk about how rare disease has changed your life, some of us might focus on some positives, like connecting to these amazing people that are really motivated and passionate about helping their kids, or it might be about some of the challenges and the difficulties. Maybe some people struggle with depression or anxiety. Maybe there have been impacts on people's marriages. When I think about the impact on, I have 5 sons and 2 of them have MTM. And when I look at the impact on their siblings, I see a lot of positives and I see a lot of beautiful things, just this increased compassion and sensitivity to people with challenges and special needs. And I also see the side that where there's sometimes this a little bit of worry about, are their brothers going to be okay? And will other people accept them and love them the way that they do? And so, the goal is to let the FDA get to know us. And that's how, we want to make sure that our priorities are being addressed and how we're really living. Our stories are so important. They have so much power. Just to give you an example of something that happened to me once, I was in this dingy, crowded Medicaid office after they had lost the renewal paperwork for Reed and Paley, and it wasn't the first time. And their medical coverage was jeopardized, with their nursing hours and everything. And I'm pouring my heart out to this worker in this office, and she gave me some advice that has always stayed with me. She said, "I don't even know you, but you are making me care about you and your kids so much right now." And she says, "I can't help you. You need to go downtown to the main office and you need to do what you're doing right here. You need to tell them your story and make them care about you just like you're making me care about you." And that's the gift of our experiences. We can make the people who have the power to help us care about our people. So, we're more than happy to coach you through this process in crafting your story or your video or anything that you want to contribute. We're 100% behind you and with you and in this together. And even if you just want to attend the PFDD, it's awesome because then they see that there's strength in numbers, that we have a community of solidarity and passion, and that we are people to be listened to and cared about.
Marie, can I share a little bit about the listening session and what you said there?
Yeah, sure.
So Melanie and I tend to be more analytical, straightforward. So our focus was talking about the disease and more of the scientific part of it, how it manifests, what it does, how it affects pulmonary issues. And that's all well and good. And then we kind of tied that into our family story. Marie gets up there and does what she just did, which is really tells it from her heart. And you could see people crying. You could hear them sniffling as she told the story. So I think we both tell excellent stories, Marie. And I think want everyone to hear that. that your story is your story and it's all special and it all impacts the people we're talking to. Because at the end, you could see that they knew about the disease, they understood the emotional toll, they understood the physical toll, and they understood about all the different aspects. So I think everybody who's on this call here today should feel comfortable in knowing that your story, your perspective, and everything that you do matters. And I think because we're all a little bit different, in many ways we're the same, but I think all of our storytelling abilities can really be woven together to tell a really honest, persuasive story that will benefit all of us, hopefully, in the very near future.
Thanks so much. In addition to that, I think that you can also be thinking broadly about how your individual with MTM-CNM can also share their story no matter how they communicate. We had an opportunity to have Will participate and share with his technology. He had also had been invited following that to do a video for Rare Disease Day using his technology. And even though it was different and the FDA people had never really worked with, with storytelling with a communication device such as that, it's something that we feel really important in terms of capturing our kids telling their story via sign, through images, through whatever whatever mode of communication they use. So we can think really creatively, and that's actually a good slide to go to. This is when we've used it a lot, and it's just all about really we can do this. We look at the resilience that our kids have, and these are just obviously our kids, but we hope to have screens filled with every image we possibly can to capture the incredible resilience that our loved ones have, how they show us how to overcome obstacles. They, think outside the box to work around challenges, the importance of looking behind the surface, utilizing all of our strengths. If anything, they've taught us how to live more deeply and more fully, pursuing things with a sense of urgency, and definitely that we really can do it together, and the importance of always having hope. So we are super excited to be in this all together and to have you join us. Please, we hope that you will leave this call and go share it with your contacts, your friends, with your fellow MTM CNM friend. We really want to be inclusive and have as many voices represented as possible. So just in terms of, we can have open discussion and then we can talk about just some logistics too.
Do we want to go offline at this point?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Just before we start recording, just be great to be sharing the Google form so we can collect who would like to participate. And then from there, we'll be providing much more instructions. We probably will host a session on the importance and how to tell your story, or just to provide some coaching around that if helpful, but also just be you and be genuine, and that's all we ask. So thank you very much for everyone joining today, and we'll look forward to doing this together, and save the date.